Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson and in this video we are going to be finishing up our look through of the Bloodborne official Artworks book. Where we left off last time was right at the start of the section about the Old Hunters DLC. So we're just gonna go ahead and get right into it. Now, just two things quickly before we start. This video is probably going to be a lot shorter compared to my other ones, just because there's not that much of the book left. However, I just wanted the final episode to be just about the DLC. And second of all, if I sound a little bit weird compared to how I normally sound in my videos, it's just because I have been awake for about 30 hours now, and I am very, very tired. So, with that out of the way, let's get started. Where is my eyedrop bookmark? So, here we go. Right where we left off, the Hunter's Nightmare. So, as we can see, we have this mashed up version of Eonum, as it looks like, it's been distorted in a dream, so it's still fairly recognizable as Cathedral Ward, but markedly different. And we'll get to some more pictures showing just that very, very shortly. So here is one of the, I would say, mid-game areas. We have a bridge. This is on our way to where we fight Ludwig. So if we were standing in this lake of blood here under the bridge, if we go straight on ahead, we go to Ludwig's boss fight. However, if we were to turn around and go this way, we would find a cave, and in that cave is a hunter with a Gatling gun, and he is an absolute menace to defeat. It actually almost seems like he is defending beasts. Apologies, my cat decided to body slam the door behind me while I was recording, so I just had to quickly put her to bed. So, as I was saying, if we go straight on, we go to Ludwig's boss arena, but if we go back, we enter a cave with a hunter with a Gatling gun, who is seemingly defending beasts, very reminiscent of Jura, both with the Gatling gun and the defense of beasts. So here we have the old hunter attire. This is a set of gear that you can unlock in the Old Hunters DLC, as well as the outfits that the hunter enemies in the Nightmare are wearing, which is just really cool. It's very old-fashioned. I know it's a Victorian era setting, but in the Nightmare, all of the hunters look like they're wearing, even older clothing and much more basic but still brutal weapons, maybe not as refined, just because they have been some of the first hunters that were trapped here, and maybe the weapons weren't quite up to speed. Here is an enemy called the Nightmare Executioner. Now, the Executioner is an enemy that we fight and encounter a lot in the main story of Bloodborne. However, in the Nightmare, where everything is twisted, he seems to have sprouted tentacles from his face and is wielding a church cannon. So this enemy is extremely powerful and not to be trifled with. personally for me, every time I see one of these guys, unless I absolutely have to, I always just run past them. But that's just me. Up next, we have a picture of the inside of Ludwig's arena. We find Ludwig at the back here. If you have played the DLC, then you know that Ludwig is probably the best boss in the DLC, if not the best boss in the entire game. And speaking of Ludwig, here he is himself. Now, we learned earlier on in the book and also in the lore that the members of the Healing Church transformed into the worst beasts imaginable. And Ludwig, being the founder of the church, seems to have transformed into the most monstrous beast of all, with a half horse looking appearance. He has a horse face with hooves, with many mouths all over him. He is an absolute monstrosity, but he still has his wits and his mind about him. And in his second phase, he pulls out his famous Moonlight Greatsword and wields it with extreme skill and dexterity. So even in this sorry state, Ludwig is an incredible foe. As you can see here, the blade is on his back, and this is his face and his head. Let me just move it here. His head right there. So a very horse-like looking appearance. Our next area of the DLC, this is after we defeat Ludwig, is the research hall. So this is a bit of backstory. This is where the Healing Church and the Hunters tried to create emissaries to commune with the Great Ones under the guise of treating and healing the sick. And despite this, Lady Maria, who we will find out more about her later on, she knew this full well, and while she knew she was powerless to put a stop to it, she visited the patients here as much as she could and did everything in her power to ease their suffering. So Lady Maria, while being a hunter, while being a killer, and an extremely skilled killer at that, she still has her compassion and her love and her humanity about her, which is what makes her one of my favorite characters, not just in Bloodborne, but in all of From Software games. Here is our hunter, player character with a torch, just to kind of give you a scale of how massive this research hall and laboratory is compared to just a standard man. Here is some more pictures of the inside of the research hall. We have some beds up here, and here we have more beds. I believe this is the area where we fight two NPCs. I might be wrong about that. I might be a different area, but again, this place is just scattered with beds and patients tied to them in absolute agony, all in the hopes that they can create something to commune with the Great Ones. This is our hunter at someone's bedside. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this, but this text simply just says bed. You know what, I'm actually just going to zoom in a little bit. Let's see, there we go. This is the lift that we use to actually enter the research hall from Ludwig's arena. We go past his arena and defeat 2 NPCs, and we gain an item which we place in this body, which then activates the lift. Before we go any further, just circling back to Ludwig. Sorry, I forgot to mention this when we were on him, just because I'm so tired. One thing about Ludwig is that if after you defeat him, if you rest at a lamp or travel to the Hunter's Dream and then come back, Ludwig's head is on the floor still alive, and you can go up and you can talk to him. When you talk to him, remember, he is the founder of the church, so all of the black church hunters and the white church hunters, which we covered in part 1 and a bit in part 2, Ludwig asks, basically, did his hunters turn out to be, the noble paragons of healing and goodness that he intended them to be? And we have 2 options of dialogue. We can either lie to him as he's about to die and tell him that yes, they are as virtuous as he wanted, or we can tell him no, that they are a failure, that they are beyond despicable and caused untold amounts of pain and suffering and death. Each one gives a different answer, but if you tell Ludwig that his hunters did live up, he sighs in relief and essentially says that, despite his transformation into the horse creature, that it was worth it as long as he was able to do some good, which is actually very sad. And then after that encounter, if you rest at a lamp or go back to the Hunter's Dream again and then come back to Ludwig's boss room again, we find that his head has now been killed by Simon, who is the main NPC in this DLC. Simon has a weapon called the bow blade, and Simon put an arrow through Ludwig's eye, killing him. So I think that's a mercy, honestly, for Ludwig, based on what he had become. But yeah, it's a very interesting part of the DLC, which just adds a lot to Ludwig's character, and is one of the reasons why I like him so much. Is this still in frame? Yes, it is. Okay. So we have a patient strapped to a chair. Here is a patient strapped to a bed. This just says clockwork patients. So these are some of the patients that we find in different states of disarray and sanity and pain and everything. Here, this is one of the bosses called the Living Failures. Now, if you have played Bloodborne, or if you remember from earlier in this series, there's an enemy type called the Celestial Emissary. They are the blue enemies, which look like aliens that have the very small body and these massive heads that look like they have little galaxies inside them. So this is what these patients eventually turned into, are these living failures. And they're called living failures because, they're living, but they're not able to commune with anything. However, we do know that eventually the church did manage to succeed in creating emissaries, but it's difficult to think about how many people had to die and suffer in order to make that happen. This is the boss arena for the Living Failures. The Living Failures are a very decisive boss fight. Some people say they are the easiest fight in the game, and others say they are the hardest. They're one of these boss fights where it's not just one enemy, there's multiple of them and they keep spawning. However, they all collectively share one health bar. So you're able to kill one, say, but then two more take its place. But the damage that you did to that one goes towards the overall boss health bar. The reason it's so divisive is because they have one attack which essentially rains meteors down on the boss arena, which, unless you have a good deal of health, almost a one-hit kill. So I know a lot of people get very angry at this fight, myself included, whenever I play Bloodborne, and I play Bloodborne more than I would like to admit. I either do this fight first try no problem, or it takes me about an hour, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. So here is a picture of the clock tower, which is the next area that we go to after defeating the Living Failures. And the clock tower is home to none other than Lady Maria. So when we first find Lady Maria, she is in the clock tower and she is dead by her own hand. She has ended her life for reasons we will discover later on. When you approach Lady Maria, it will initiate her boss fight. But first, she has a quote here, so let me read that real quick. So, Lady Maria says, "A corpse should be left well enough alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will cure you now, liberate you from your wild curiosity," which is just such a cool line. And her boss fight, while relatively easy, she's very parryable. It's, again, one of those spectacle fights, and Bloodborne is the master at hunter on hunter or NPC on NPC boss fights, in my opinion. Now, fun fact about Lady Maria, I don't even know if you can call this fun, but it's definitely a fact. The doll that is in the Hunter's Nightmare that Gurman made is based on Lady Maria, as they were both some of the original hunters, so they knew each other. What makes it creepier, though, is that you can find the Hunter's Dream in the waking world, which is just a normal version, like a normal workshop and stuff. But the doll is still there, and Gurman has this famous line when you first start the game, he says something along the lines of, you can use all the equipment that you can see in the workshop, and then he whispers, even the doll, if you so desire. So Gurman made a sex doll out of one of his comrades in arms because he had a crush on her, which I think it's good that Lady Maria died before she found that out, because that's just absolutely awful. But here's some more concept art of her with her Rachio. Again, that's my favorite weapon in the game. after we defeat Lady Maria, we go through the clock tower and enter our final area of the DLC, the fishing hamlet. I know a lot of people say that Bloodborne takes a lot of inspiration or just straight up copies stuff from H.P. Lovecraft, which is true. However, the fishing hamlet is probably the most obvious reference or copy from H.P. Lovecraft, especially his story, The Shadow over Innsmouth. I'm not going to spoil that here, but if you have not read it, and like Bloodborne and like cosmic horror, definitely go and check it out. Okay, let's continue. So here we have some pictures of the fishing hamlet, which has become an absolute ruin. You can see some of the houses down here. These are what have become of the villages. They have transformed into these half-human, half-fish hybrids with barnacles sticking out of them. These two have spears, which actually makes sense, because it's a fishing village. So yeah, people would have spears. These are some more enemy types down here. This is the well that we find near the center of the fishing hamlet. Now, this is where Lady Maria, after seeing what the hunters and the church did to the poor people of the fishing hamlet, she was so disgusted and so ashamed, she threw her weapon down into a well, went back into the clock tower, sealed it so that no one could enter, and then took her own life. So this enemy here is called a giant fishman. It doesn't really look like it in the photo, however, in-game they remind me very much of sharks. So when you jump down this well, this enemy is the strongest type of enemy in the fishing hamlet. He's an absolute tank and takes ages to take down, and the movement is so erratic, and for something of that size, they move incredibly fast. So when you jump down the well to get the Rakio for yourself, you find not one, but two of these guys. And then once you defeat them after multiple attempts, because let's be honest, it takes everyone multiple attempts, you get the Rakio. Definitely makes you work for it, but it's well worth it. I know I'm like a broken record saying that it's my favorite weapon. One bad thing about it being my favorite weapon, though, is it being at the very end of the DLC means that for starting a new game, you essentially have to play through like 4/5 of the entire game just to get it. And then it's great for like New Game Plus, but for your first run, you pick it up and then 10 minutes later the game's over, which is annoying to say the least. This is deeper down in the tunnels under the fishing hamlet. As you can see, there's loads of slugs and fish and everything. As we know, slugs are related to the great ones, so something's happening here to do with a great one or some kind of cosmic force. Here we have a enemy called the Snail Lady, which is a lady who has become a snail. Very terrifying. Again, very Lovecraftian. Actually kind of reminds me a bit of Junji Ito, but maybe that's just me. And here we go at the end, the Orphan of Cause. So let's do a little bit of a lore dump just so you guys know what I'm talking about. So Cause is this creature here. Cause is a great one. Cause washed up on shore dead, and because of that the townsfolk began to worship Cause. That's what transformed them, that's what made them what they are when we enter the village. However, Cause was pregnant, and when we arrive, despite being dead, Cause gives birth, because, you know, death for a great one does not mean death the same way it does for you and I. So this is the Orphan of Cause. While he appears to be a massively tall, full-grown man, at this point he's maybe 20 seconds old, and his weapon of choice is his placenta, which is horrifying and amazing at the same time, and the screeches and screams this thing yells out are terrifying. Absolutely great encounter. I know Bloodborne is technically a horror game as well as a Soulsborne game, but the fishing hamlet to me is the most horror that Bloodborne ever really gets, and trust me, it gets it. It knocks it out of the park. Here's a great picture. This is after we defeat the Orphan of Cause. We have our hunter looking at the moon in the sky, and that is the end of the DLC. So here we just have some different types of characters and armor. So first at the top here we have Yamamura the Wanderer. Down here we have the Butcher's Attire. I believe this is a set of gear that you can acquire in the game, though I'm actually not sure, as I have never personally picked up this set, or maybe I have and I just cannot remember. Here we have Brador Church Assassin. This one confuses me because a little bit, because is he an assassin for the Brador Church? And if so, what is the Brador Church? Or is his name Brador, comma, the Church Assassin? I think it's Brador, comma, Church Assassin, which makes sense for Bloodborne. You know, the Church having assassins is nothing new. And finally, we have the Harrowed Attire, which is here. This is actually the armor, or not the armor, the gear we get from completing Simon's quest in the DLC. Simon is kind of like a little guide. He doesn't really guide us, but he shows up close to every bonfire after we defeat each boss. And he is also the man that has the bowblade weapon, which is, in my opinion, it's not that great. It probably is really good if you have a good build with it, but for me, I don't really like it. Next up is some of the weapons. So we are just gonna run through these quickly. So starting off, we have the Hunter's Axe here. We have the Threaded Cane. This is it in its standard form. This is it when it's elongated and turns into a whip. Here we have the saw cleaver in both positions. Next we have the standard hunter's pistol. This picture is actually really cool of it kind of in the middle of reloading. Here is the hunter's blunderbuss. I've never been a fan of the blunderbuss. I always just go with the pistol, just because it sprays like buckshot, whereas the pistol just shoots one single straight bullet, and at the end of the day they both do the same job. I'm not sure if the pistol has more range. I think it does, but don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure I'm wrong, actually. Okay, next up we have the rifle spear, aka the worst weapon in the game. The rifle spear is a perfect example of an excellent idea that was executed horrendously. It is so bad, and this isn't just my opinion. Ask any Bloodborne player about the rifle spear and they'll tell you that it's awful. So this is the Tonitrus. This is a mace looking weapon that has an ability, or that secondary ability is to charge it full of electricity, which is really good against enemies that are weak to electricity. It's definitely worth picking up in case you ever get stuck and you need that little bit of extra elemental damage. But yeah, it's a good weapon. It's not great. And keep in mind, all of me saying this, I'm a Rakuyo guy, so just keep that in mind. Here's the saw spear, very similar to the saw cleaver, just a lot thinner and a lot pointier. This is the stake driver, which I think is very cool. It's an okay weapon, honestly, but just the design of it, I think, is absolutely incredible. Yeah. Okay, moving on, we have the Blades of Mercy, which is Eileen's weapons. They are one dagger that is comprised of two daggers, and then their trick weapon is to then dual wield two daggers, so they are very good at quick, fast attacks, especially if you are going with something like bleed or anything like that. Then we just have the wooden shield and the torch, which aren't anything special. The torch actually is special. I take that back. The torch is a very useful thing to have. The wooden shield, not so much. Sorry, got ahead of myself there. So next we have Ludwig's rifle, which just looks incredible. This is a weapon that we find in the old Hunters DLC. I absolutely love this thing. I never play with characters that can use it. However, I just always admire it based on how it looks. Next, we have the repeating pistol here. Not really much to say, it's just a pistol that repeats, but it does have a very cool design. I do really like the Bloodborne take on kind of more grounded weaponry. Like, they do have the more fantastical weapons, don't get me wrong, but the take on like grounded weaponry with just a little bit of make-believe mixed in is always really cool to me. Here we have the Kirk Hammer, one of my favorite weapons. I never use it. In every From Software game, I play a strength faith build. However, in Bloodborne, I dex to the max. So it has two forms. The first being its heavy form, which is essentially a giant stone that acts as the sword's sheath, which you use as a hammer to smash enemies into pulp. And then the other form is just a standard longsword for quick attacks, which it's a very good combo, and I think the Kirk hammer, in my opinion, is the best example of the trick weapon system in Bloodborne. Here is Ludwig's Holy Blade. I'm actually not that big of a fan of this weapon. It's okay. I mean, stat-wise, it's really good. It's one of the most popular weapons in the game, but to me, it just feels like a Dark Souls weapon. It doesn't feel like a Bloodborne weapon. I don't know how to describe it, but if you've played Bloodborne, then you know what I'm talking about. Let's continue. So here we have the cannon, which is a cannon, which I don't really need to say much else. It's incredibly powerful. But it burns through your Quicksilver bullets like you would not believe, so it's very much a gimmick weapon, but it is very, very fun to use. I will give you that. Next up, we have the Flame Sprayer here. Not really that big of a fan of it. We get this right at the start of the game, after... So we have the Flame Sprayer here, which is essentially a flamethrower. I don't really like it. I'm sure someone does, but it's just not really my playstyle. Next up, over here, we have the Rosa Marinus. I believe I'm saying that right. If I butchered it, I'm sure someone will let me know in the comments. Again, same kind of thing as the Flame Sprayer, just not for me. Here is the Garius's Wheel. So these are one of the weapons used by the Executioners, and this is what Alfred uses when he attacks Annalise at Canehurst Castle. Very, very brutal looking weapon. Here we have the Shikage, which is a katana. This is another Canehurst weapon. I really like this weapon a lot. I think it's good. My build in Bloodborne, by the way, is Dex and Blood Tinge. So this with the Evelyn handgun, which we'll get to shortly, is a brilliant combination, and I absolutely love it. The Rakuyo is always going to be my number one, but the Shikage is definitely my number two. The Shikage is what I use up until the point where I get the Rakuyo, because like I said earlier, you have to essentially get to the end of the game to get the Rakuyo. This is the Reiter Palash. Again, another Canehurst weapon, very elegant, requires Dex and Blood Tinge. It's like a sword with a little pistol over it. Very cool design, but I do not like this weapon at all. Here is the Evelyn. This is my go-to handgun in Bloodborne. Even if I'm not doing a Blood Tinge build, I always use the Evelyn just because I think it looks really cool. Blood Tinge, by the way, allows you to, if you have any pistols that scale with Blood Tinge, you can actually do significant damage with your pistol instead of just using them for parries and riposts, which I think is really cool. So here we have the Blade of Mercy. This is German's scythe that he uses during his boss fight. Once we get it, this is a weapon that we only get in New Game Plus. So you have to beat the game at least once to be able to unlock this, but it is so much fun to use. Next, we have the boom hammer. These belong to the powder keg hunters. Their motto is, if it don't got kick, it just ain't worth it. And what it essentially is, it's a hammer that when it hits the ground, it causes an explosion, which is hilarious on its own and devastating to the the recipient of the attack. But what I find personally funny is all of the other Hunter Workshop groups essentially consider the powder keg hunters heretics because of just how insane their weapons are, which I think is so funny. Here we have the Beast Hunter Scythe. This is getting into the old hunter weapons now. This looks like a kind of like a proto saw spear without the serrated edge. But yeah, the old Hunters DLC does have some good weapons, but I'm not really a big fan of them apart from the Rakio. Here is the Beast Hunter. Here's the Beast Cutter. As you can see, this is it in its standard form, which is it's not even a proper cleaver, like it's properly blunt with these teeth coming out of it, but then it extends into a whip, kind of like the threaded cane. This is the weapon that you're gonna find most of the hunter enemies in the Old Hunters DLC using, and it can be very annoying if you do not deal with it quickly or if you do not learn the parry window. Once you learn the parry window, it's a piece of cake. Here we have the Whirligig Saw, or the Beyblade. It actually is really good. Jokes aside, like for enemies who are weak against serration damage, this is really good, but other than that, nah. Its second form though is just essentially a mace, which is good, but yeah. Next up is the Church Cannon. This is a massive cannon wielded by some of the heavies of the church. It's a lot better and higher damage than the cannon that we saw earlier. This is the Gatling gun. This is what the hunter in the cave that I mentioned earlier uses, that we can acquire. Again, very fun to use, but burns through quicksilver bullets like you would not believe. The piercing rifle, I have actually never used this weapon, so I am not going to make any comments on it. Here is Simon's bow blade. So it's a bow and arrow that has the ranged aspect, but then transforms into this curved sword, which is awesome. I really like the ingenuity that the team at From Software came up with of how to transform essentially the same weapon into two completely different weapons, both in function and in appearance. Yeah, I don't like using this weapon, but I think looking at it is so cool. This is the Blood Letter, a very arcane weapon. I'm not super familiar with it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Over here is my beloved, the Rakuyo. So it is a katana and a tanto, or a dagger. You can use them in one of two ways. You can either dual wield them with one in each hand, or you can slot them together to create this double-sided spear, very reminiscent of Darth Maul. and the moveset for it is crazy, and that's why I love it. This is the church pick. It doesn't really... Actually, no, it does do it justice here. And fun fact, this is always another weapon that I use a lot. Because it does incredible piercing damage. So it starts off at this kind of small mini spear looking weapon, but then transforms into this massive scythe that you can like impale enemies from a great distance. And it's great for keeping enemies at a distance if you are getting overwhelmed, though it is not good at crowd control. Next up, we have the amygdala arm. We get this, I actually can't even remember where we get this, but it's a very interesting weapon. Again, I've never used it. I've never really done arcane or magic in Bloodborne, but it is fun to use. I've seen gameplay of it and it looks awesome. This is the Beast Claw for those of you who want to embrace your inner beast. In the DLC, there is actually a way to temporarily become a beast. And with this equipped, you do insane damage, which I just think is so cool. Over here we have the Cause Parasite, which is a arcane weapon in Bloodborne, which is essentially Bloodborne's version of magic. Again, I've never used magic in Bloodborne, so I'm not sure how good it is or not. I do know that its main attack is it launches a massive tentacle out of your hand that does massive damage. Here we have the Lock Shield, lock meaning lake. Again, never use this because I just avoid shields like the plague in Bloodborne. And last but not least, I believe, is the Moonlight Greatsword, which it would not be a From Software game without the Moonlight Greatsword. To me, it falls into the same category as Ludwig's Holy Blade. It seems like a Dark Souls weapon and doesn't really belong in Bloodborne, but it is still really fun to use, and if you like using it, then by all means go for it. Do and play in whatever way makes you happy. Next, we just have some items, so we're not going to go through them all, but we have, Quicksilver bullets, Hunter's Mark, pebbles, fire paper, electric paper, Madman's Knowledge, Great Madman's Knowledge. All of the consumable items are not consumable. Actually, yes, some of these are consumable and some of them are used for certain things. Here we have more magic-based items up here. Here, these are Blood Echoes, which are Bloodborne's version of souls, or runes if you play Elden Ring. So these are where you go and you pick up and you get a certain amount of them that then you can use in your inventory later to gain a certain amount. Here we have some gems, or blood gems that we can equip into our weapon, along with upgrade materials like bloodstone shard, bloodstone chunk, all that stuff. Same thing here. These are key items that we find throughout the game. Let's see. These are mainly just keys. Oh, this is actually Annalise's flesh that you can pick up once Alfred is done with her. And if you have this in your inventory, and way back in part 1 where we talked about Abritus, hidden by the choir, who was kind of mourning one of her dead kin over an altar. If you go to that altar with the queen's flesh in your inventory, you have the option of reviving her, which I just think is really, really cool. These are the different chalices that you need to access the chalice dungeons. You get some of these organically just by playing and progressing the game. Others you get by playing the chalice dungeons themselves. Next up, we have some more chalice dungeon items. Here are some bloodstones that we use for leveling up and enhancing our equipment. These are Kareth runes. These act essentially as rings from Dark Souls or talismans from Elden Ring, where you equip 2 of these and you gain a little bit of a perk. And it's interesting the way you do it in Bloodborne. It's not a case of putting on a talisman or putting on a ring. No, you engrave these symbols into your brain to get them to work, which I just think is such a cool idea and a cool take. Because these are abilities from unknown eldritch horrors, so you would need to do something similar to that to be able to, 1, understand what they actually mean, and 2, to use them. Also, they're called Kareth runes because Kareth was a member of Bergenworth who had a skill for deciphering the Great One's speech, and these are what he made for them. And over here, we just have some more items and stuff like that. And that, everyone, is the end of the Bloodborne official Artworks book. Thank you so much for sticking through this whole series. I really hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed going through the book. I've gone through this book a couple of times now. This is probably my 3rd time, and every time I still love it. I love everything to do with Bloodborne, and being able to share it with you guys is an absolute treat for me. So the next art book that we are going to be covering on the channel will be another From Software game, though I'm not sure which one just yet. However, if you have a suggestion for another art book that you would like me to cover, first, please leave a comment down below, and I will be sure to cover that book. If not next, then after the next one. I will cover essentially whatever books you guys want me to cover. That's my main priority. So your viewership means the absolute world to me. If you are watching this video or listening to this video as you are going to bed, this is the end of the video, so I would turn it off now so that the ad does not wake you up. Again, thank you so much for watching. My name has been Crimson, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.